Hello, and welcome to Hours In, an exploration of various free games, demos, and more. This time, we're beyond the veil, in the 2D, Souls-like, love letter to Symphony of the Night, Death's Gambit, Afterlife, which is an upgraded/expanded version of Death's Gambit developed by White Rabbit and published by Adult Swim Games. Afterlife is published by Serenity Forge, however. Additional information about Death's Gambit Afterlife can be found in the description. Looking at the footage you've seen so far, along with the short description I gave earlier, I'm sure you can tell exactly what type of experience this is. Afterlife takes a lot of elements from both the Dark Souls and the Castlevania games. Things like saving at predetermined points, which causes enemies to respawn, dropping something when and where you died, blocking, dodging, parrying based combat, bosses with gigantic health bars, and requiring certain abilities to open up new pathways on the map. I'm bringing all this up right now because if you're a fan of the Souls games or the later Castlevanias, you'll know exactly what to expect here. Veteran fans of one or both franchises should really experience it and learn the game's systems for themselves before I get too far into it. It's free on Epic until August 22nd, 2024. Why not give it a try? For people like me, who don't have much experience with games in the genre, here's a not-so-brief rundown on how Afterlife works. We play as Soren, a knight who, along with others, was sent on an expedition in search of the secret of immortality. Things didn't quite go as planned, and Soren, as well as the entire personnel of the ill-fated journey, were vanquished. However, death itself has plans for Soren. We're granted a horrifying eternal life and told to continue our mission, with the caveat being that we are to destroy the secret of immortality once we find it. Before we're resurrected, though, we have a few choices to make. First, which of the 7 classes do we play as? Each class has a different set of starting equipment, a different stat spread, more on that later, and a slightly different talent sort of skill tree. For now, I'd just read the little playstyle blurb the game gives you for each class. Example, the Blood Knight is all about hacking and slashing, while the Wizard is more focused on ranged melee combat. Your choice isn't set in stone just yet. Afterlife gives you a little sandbox with some training dummies to test out your class's playstyle before you lock it in. That said, the classes aren't super rigid or anything. If you pick, say, the Soldier, and grow to hate the longsword, you can easily change weapons later on, providing you have the appropriate stats for whatever weapon you'd like to change to. So don't stress about it too much. Once you've picked a class that you're happy with for the time being, we're afforded with another choice. An assortment of extra items are laid out in front of us, and we get to pick one to take with us at the start of the game. Don't stress too much about these either, as a great number of them are consumable and frequently found within the game itself. Pick one you like the sound of, and get ready for the adventure to begin. We're dropped into the game next to our horse, on the trail to Gaian's Cradle. Once we jump the gap, the pathway behind us erodes away, signaling that we won't be heading back that way anytime soon. We can dismount the horse by hitting down on the D-pad. This serves as our interact button by default. After that, we jump up the platforms using A, and we come to our first helpful tombstone inscription. Throughout the rest of this section of the game, we'll encounter lots of these little stones that will explain the controls more thoroughly, but here's a basic rundown. Obviously, I'm playing using a controller. Something else to note here, I found it much more comfortable to change the movement to the D-pad rather than using the analog stick. As I said before, down on the D-pad is our basic interact button, which can be used for mounting, dismounting the horse, reading signs, and resting at death's idols. A is jump, B is backstep, or, when used while holding a direction, dodge roll. X is attack or weapon 1, right trigger is attack number 2, or weapon 2 if equipped, Left trigger is shield. Left trigger and right trigger does a slide that can damage or discombobulate certain enemies. Y uses your first ability. And finally, left bumper switches which item you have selected. This can be seen in the bottom right of the screen. And right bumper uses it. Keep in mind that's just a basic overview. It wouldn't really do much good to have me prattle off every single button combination here. Once you actually get into combat, you'll see how the controls sort of play off of each other and lead to a more diverse, deep system. While we're on the subject of combat, you have a red health bar and a green stamina bar. Plus, later you get a blue-purple soul energy bar, but we'll ignore that for now. Basic maneuvers in combat drain your stamina. Attacking, sliding, dodging, etc. Don't worry though, your stamina regenerates on its own. The speed at which it does so is based on your haste stat, HST, and how much total stamina you have is based on your endurance stat, END. Obviously, when you take damage, your health goes down. You can replenish your health in a few ways. The main one, though, is by using plumes. Plumes are the little feathers that, when used, heal a certain amount of health. They're semi-consumable, in that you have a limited number of them at any one time, but they regenerate whenever you rest at a death idol. Resting also replenishes your health. I think they work sort of like that flask that you have in Dark Souls. You can upgrade your plumes as well as get different ones to do things like heal more than the starting one, grant you some buffs, heal faster, etc. Where it gets interesting though, is upon death. When you die, you drop a plume where you stood in your final moments and respawn at the last idol that you rested at. This means that when you're resurrected, you have one less Phoenix plume to heal with until you go and pick it back up again. Unlike similar games in the genre, however, the plume you drop doesn't disappear or anything if you happen to meet your end again while you're searching for it. You merely drop another one and are resurrected again, missing yet another additional plume. Try to keep an eye on your map though. Since the game does not actually mark the spot where you left the plume, you'll want to remember sort of where it ended up. But what if your plumes are scattered all over the map and you have no idea how to get them? Luckily, there is another option. At the Death's Idol, you can instantly reclaim any lost plumes by paying a little bit of essence. Be warned though, this cost does increase over time. But what is essence? Essence is gained from defeating enemies and is the game's main currency, if you want to call it that. You can use it to reclaim plumes, as I mentioned, but also for leveling up your stats and buying items and abilities at the merchants. For the most part though, enemies seem to drop more than enough items, and they respawn whenever you rest, so I mainly used it for leveling up stats. As I touched on a little bit before, your character's stats play a vital role in Death's Gambit. Vitality, VIT, relates to your health. Both your amount of maximum health points and the effectiveness of healing with plumes are based on your vitality stat. STR, strength. Some weapons and abilities damage is scaled based on strength. In addition to this, some weapons and shields require a certain strength stat to wield. FIN, finesse. Some weapons and abilities damage is scaled based on finesse. In addition to this, some weapons require a certain finesse stat to wield. Endurance, END. As previously mentioned, your character's maximum stamina is based on your endurance stat. Intellect, INT. Spell damage scales with intellect, and some spells require a certain intellect stat to cast. In addition to this, your character's resistance to magic is also based on your intellect stat. Haste, HST. As mentioned previously, the speed at which your stamina naturally regenerates is based on your haste stat. In addition to this, a higher haste stat means a shorter cooldown time on your special abilities. You can increase these stats while resting at an idol, and spending the appropriate amount of essence. I know I keep harping on about certain item this, some items that, so let's get into the items. First up, we have weapons. At the beginning of the game, you might have tried out one or two through the class systems, unless you're like me and instantly picked Acolyte of Death, played for a while, then started a new file as an assassin. You can either have 2 weapons equipped, each with 1 attack, or 1 weapon equipped with 2 attacks. So far, I've mostly been playing with my class's main weapon, plus a secondary weapon that complements it. As I say, I'm an assassin, so I have the daggers as my main weapon, and then something with a longer range like a bow or a spear as weapon number 2. You've also got a shield. Block with left trigger. If you block just as the enemy attack is about to land, you can hit the attack button again right after to land a finishing strike. You can change what's equipped at any time through the start menu, provided you meet the minimum stats of whatever you'd like to switch to if they have any. You also have slots for a helmet, a cape, boots, an aura, your plumes, as well as 4 consumable slots. After striking down enough enemies, you should have a pretty large inventory of stuff to choose from. The helmet, cape, boots, and shield are pretty self-explanatory. They have different buffs and bonuses. As I touched on earlier, the different plumes can have effects like cast faster, etc. The 4 equipable slots are usually used for consumables like a berry that removes poison, that kind of thing. They can be used like the plumes by selecting them using the left bumper and then hitting the right bumper to use them. The auras do different passive things like healing after certain combos, constantly generating soul energy, etc. Soul energy, you say. As I brushed aside previously, later on in the game, you'll get a 3rd blue/purple bar underneath your health and stamina. This is the soul energy bar. Soul energy is consumed when you use your special ability, and seems to go down a little bit on its own over time. You can get it either by attacking enemies, or performing certain actions based on your character's class. Example, the assassin gains soul energy by roll dodging enemy attacks. As for the special abilities I've been speaking of, you can have 3 special abilities equipped at a time that are accessed by spending soul energy and hitting a button or button combination. You can change which abilities are equipped at Death's Idols. Some abilities are weapon-based and thus require you to have a weapon of that type equipped to use. Others can be used at any time providing you have the soul energy. You can learn abilities by purchasing them from NPCs, finding them in the world, or by unlocking them in the talent skill tree. Now here we are talking about the talent tree. The talent tree is basically your character's skill tree progression. You can spend talent points, which are obtained either by defeating bosses, called immortals, or in other ways, like planting a seed of knowledge. Different classes have slightly different talent trees. So there's the rundown. There's obviously a lot more to this game than what I've laid out here, like scrapping and upgrading items, and probably a whole load of other mechanics that I just haven't encountered yet. I don't know what it is about this game, but I just keep getting pulled back to it. While making this video, I'd boot up the game to capture just like some small specific part, and end up playing for over an hour every time without fail. I love the art, the music, and the slick combat. What I like most, I think, though, is the difficulty. Since it's in the Soul Sphere, difficulty is a large part of its identity, but it doesn't pummel you with it and make you feel like a failure like some of the other games in the genre. Death isn't the end of the world. Forgetting where your plumes are isn't the end of the world. The only things I didn't like: 1, some of the platforming feels a tiny bit janky, though I wonder if that's intentional since it sort of reminds me of the early Castlevania's platforming segments. 2, I felt sort of lost a couple times, not really knowing where I could go. and traveling throughout the map takes a while, even with the horse. Those two minor gripes aside, I've heard that the Afterlife version fixes a lot of issues that the original Death's Gambit release had, but this video isn't about that, and I don't have enough knowledge of either release to really speak on that. I just thought I'd mention it, if you're looking the game up and got sort of confused like I did, whether Afterlife's a sequel or a remake or what. If you're watching this before August 22nd, 2024 at 11 a.m., just log into the Epic Games Store and grab it. It's free. After you do that, make sure you set up a reminder on your phone every week to remind you to grab the games. You don't have to play them right away, just get them on your account for a rainy day. Thank you so much for watching. Hours in. What did you think? Are you a Dark Souls fan? Castlevania? Metroid? Is this your first Souls adjacent game? What did you think of the systems within Death's Gambit Afterlife? Did you play the original Death's Gambit release? What changed? Feel free to let me know in the comments, and thanks again for watching. I hope to see you again in the next video.